Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa alaikum assalam. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والعاقبة للمتقين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Dear brothers and sisters, on the way here I was actually reflecting with the brother that was bringing me on subhanAllah this topic and thinking about where I would be had I not had my parents. And to be very honest with you, I would be absolutely nowhere. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, listening to Ustad Nu'man talk about the importance of spending time with your parents. You have no idea how important that is. And the topic of it all starts with the home. That's a pretty generic topic when we're talking about it all starts with the home. Many of you might see that as offensive to the parents because a lot of times parents try to raise their children in a certain way and then it doesn't work out. A lot of times we wait until our kids turn 14, 15, 16 and then we wonder why they're not acting like Sahaba when they haven't had the tarbiyah of the Sahaba for the first 16 years of their lives. And there's a very important concept here in Islam. A young man once was brought to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and he's kind of being pulled by the ear by his dad. And everyone knows Umar ibn Khattab. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, you do not want to get in trouble with that guy. If he hits you, he's going to hit you pretty hard. Alright, so you can imagine what's going through the mind of this kid as he's being brought to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and his dad is saying, he is a asi, he is disobedient to me, he doesn't listen to me, he doesn't fulfill his rights to his parents. Basically what they do to every single imam in the country, every single day you see a dad that hasn't prayed Fajr in the masjid for 10 years, coming up with his son, and you haven't seen his son in the masjid for even longer than that, right? And saying, Sheikh, talk to my son. Tell him about the importance of the father in Islam. Tell him how he should treat his mom. What's wrong with him? Right? Go ahead, tell him. And I used to always go through that. SubhanAllah, I'm thinking to myself, here we go again. Right? And the hypocrisy is always there. Right? And I once had he's not a kid, actually someone that I grew up with, SubhanAllah, and he went through a lot of hardships in his life. Got involved with drugs, even became a drug dealer at one point. Right? And SubhanAllah, it was strange because his dad was bringing him to talk to me, and we were the same age, and I grew up with him, to give him some advice and things of that sort. And so his dad is there, and his dad says, can you talk to him about drugs and how bad drugs are and stuff like that? Can you please tell him not to smoke weed anymore and, give him the magic touch and the Holy Spirit or whatever it is it's supposed to be. SubhanAllah, and I'm sitting there, so I'm looking at the dad and I'm like, you dropped the ball. I can't say it to him but you dropped the ball. But anyway, before I can even say that, his son goes, whoa, hold on. He says, Sheikh Omar, is selling alcohol any different than selling marijuana? I went, nope. He said, but my dad sells alcohol. And then his dad said, that's different and it's legal and I didn't go to jail. You're the one who went to jail. And he started getting really defensive. So he said, so because the law of the land says that my crime was worse than yours, your sin doesn't exist anymore? I'm sitting there like, God, I'm so good. And I wanted to laugh and I was just sitting there like, SubhanAllah, Then, it's funny because about 2 months later, he's coming to tell me about how his son, who's got much bigger problems, keeps listening to music on his iPod. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, that's the least of his problems. I don't know why you're doing this. So we're back in the sitting again. And apparently his dad didn't learn from the first time. And he's sitting there talking about, he listens to music, things of that sort. And his son gets him again. And he says, Dad, you go to sleep every single night listening to Kulthum for 2 hours. Who are you to tell me that I'm wasting time listening to music? That's your problem too. So the point is that a lot of times, people can sense hypocrisy, especially children, from their parents. So back to the story of Umar ibn Khattab. The young man is being pulled by his dad, and he's with his dad in front of Umar ibn Khattab. My son doesn't listen to me. My son is disobedient. My son hasn't fulfilled his rights to me. And the son of that man says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah, go ahead. He said, does the child have rights on the parents? And Umar ibn Khattab was all about rights, huquq, a man of justice, subhanAllah. Whether it was the right of the animal, Umar ibn Khattab was a man who was all about justice. So he said, yes, absolutely, the child has rights over the parents. He says, what are they? He said that he should give him a good name, and he should choose a good mother for him, and obviously vice versa, right? And he should teach him the Quran. These are 3 rights that every single child has. So he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, my dad gave me a terrible name, he chose a horrible mother, and he never once taught me a word of the Quran. So Umar ibn al-Khattab looked at the dad and said, you oppressed him before he oppressed you. Go away. This was your fault. You wronged him before he could wrong you. And many times what we see, unfortunately, when we read into the lives of the Sahaba, we forget that these were family men. And we forget that these were family women. These were mothers and fathers. Not only that, their effect rubbed off on their children. You see the Abadila, right? That they have a lofty status in Islam. Abdullah ibn Umar, the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab, who many of the Sahaba felt was the most qualified Khalifa after Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar ibn al-Khattab said, he needs to stay away. One person from my family is enough for the Khilafah. Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Subhanallah, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who's the exception because Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was a slave before he came to Islam. The point is that when you look at the great scholars in our deen and those who made a difference, it started with something special. It started with their parents. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, whose father was a great scholar, whose grandfather was a great scholar, whose great-great-grandfather was a great scholar, right? Whose brothers were scholars. It started with something special, and I want to talk about the most special human being that exists in our deen, in our history, after the prophets. And who is that? You guys need to know this. Who is the greatest person whom the sun has risen and set upon after the Anbiya? Really? It's not, no? You guys really don't know this? Okay. You guys are really sleepy. Should we get up and stretch? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. The Prophet ﷺ said, there is no human being, no man who the sun has ever risen upon or set upon greater than Abu Bakr, except that he was a prophet. Let's look at the family of Abu Bakr for a moment. Now Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, we know how he is. We know how much he loves the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The man loved the Prophet ﷺ so much that he could be beaten to a bloody pulp and he wouldn't care about his own self, he would just care about Rasulullah ﷺ. In the very early phases of the da'wah, when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu saw the Prophet ﷺ being beaten and being humiliated, Abu Bakr was the one who ran out and said, you beat him just because he says La ilaha illallah, you oppress him. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who was a very skinny man, soft person, was beaten to a bloody pulp, choked, had the shoes of Quraysh in his face, beaten in the face with shoes until he went unconscious radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and was dragged to his family's home, and his mother was holding him, trying to wake him up from his unconsciousness. And when he woke up and he saw his mother had that glass of water for him, Abu Bakr said, where's Rasulullah? Is he okay? SubhanAllah, you ever see someone when they wake up from a long sleep or when they wake up from a coma or something like that? It takes a while to get oriented, right? To wake up to your surroundings. If any of you have ever seen someone who's coming out of that state of unconsciousness, Abu Bakr wakes up, he says, Aina Rasulullah? Where's Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Is he okay? Did he make it out safely? Was he beaten? I need to see him right away. He didn't want to drink, eat anything. Let me go make sure he's okay. He went to Dar al-Arqam, he found the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he embraced him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was so happy, not even paying attention to his own wounds, that the Prophet ﷺ was okay. And we know in Hijrah, when Abu Bakr was with the Messenger ﷺ, and while he's with the Messenger ﷺ, they haven't had anything to eat or drink for days, and they come to the house of Ma'bad radiallahu anha, who has barren cows that don't produce. And Rasulullah ﷺ allows that cow to give milk, and when the Prophet ﷺ drinks, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu goes, فَشَرِبَ الرَّسُولُ حَتَّى ارْتَوَيْتُ. The Prophet ﷺ drank until my thirst was quenched. When Rasulullah ﷺ becomes sick, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he says, مَرِضَ الْحَبِيبُ فَعُدْتُهُ فَمَرِضْتُ مِنْ وَلَهِ عَلَيْهِ. My beloved one became sick, so I went to visit him, and I got sick from seeing him sick. فَعَادَنِ الْحَبِيبُ فِي مَرَضِي. So when I got sick, the Prophet ﷺ got healthy and he came and visited me because I was sick now. فَبَرِئْتُ مِنْ نَظَرِي إِلَيْهِ. I felt cured as soon as I looked at him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam healthy. Love the Prophet ﷺ more than any other human being. And there's story upon story upon story upon story. But now, how did this affect his family? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu involved his family in each and every single one of these instances. And he taught them to love the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam the way he loved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Look at this family of ghuraba. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha explains, she's a young girl and she's observing Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The day the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to tell Abu Bakr that you're going with me on the hijrah. And this isn't some journey where you're going to have this grand, this grand caravan going through, and you're going to have escorts everywhere. And trust me, they weren't thinking about Tala al-Badr wa alayna. This was the journey of death. You are going to accompany a man who's marked for death, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. A man who has an entire country after him right now to kill him. And you have the privilege of accompanying him to Medina. And Aisha radiallahu anha says, I'd heard before, I was a young girl, I'd heard before of people who cry out of happiness, but I never really understood till I saw my father that day. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, As-suhba ya Rasulullah, your companionship, O Messenger of Allah. As-suhba ya Rasulullah, your companionship, O Messenger of Allah. Imagine the effect. She said, I'd heard about this before. I heard that people cry out of joy. But this was the first time I ever really saw someone really cry out of joy. It was my father when Rasulullah ﷺ came to tell him that he would be accompanying him on the hijrah. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu involves his family. He has Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr to go out and to look, to see what the plans of Quraysh are. He has Asma radiallahu ta'ala anha to sneak food to them. And Asma radiallahu anha suffered. Asma was slapped by Abu Jahl. Abdullah suffered. He involved the whole family in the struggle. Look at the tarbiyah. And when he got to Medina, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu in the battle of Badr, you know who was on the other side? His son, Abdurrahman. His son, Abdurrahman. Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr fought against the Muslims in Badr. And later on when he became Muslim and he became a great companion, there's no doubt about it, no doubting his status. He's sitting with his dad one day and he's talking to his dad and he says, in the battle of Badr, you can imagine this father-son exchange. He says, I realized I was fighting against the Muslims because he buckled to peer pressure. But he said, every time I saw you on the battlefield, I went and I hid. I ran away. Because I didn't want to fight you, Dad. Sweet moment, right? Abu Bakr says, that's funny because I was looking for you. For fighting against Allah and His Messenger, I was looking for you. SubhanAllah. He's teaching his son. There is priorities in this household. Putting Allah and His Messenger first. This is his tarbiyah. Living tarbiyah. Right? SubhanAllah. He's showing them with example how important Allah and the Messenger are to him. And for that reason, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu never ever came down. And the children learned the exact same behavior. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha and the Prophet yes, they were human beings. They had a little bit of a marital spat. And Rasulullah said to Aisha, well, how about we have someone, an arbitrator. How about we have someone listen to both sides of the story and judge between us? He was human, he didn't just say, look, I'm Rasulullah, you're not, shh, be quiet, back to the kitchen woman. He didn't do that. He said, okay, ya Aisha, let's bring somebody to reason with us, to listen to both sides of us, even though he's ma'soom, he's infallible, but the Prophet is coming down to her level. She says, okay, who's it going to be? So the Prophet ﷺ suggested Abu Ubaidah al-Jarrah, radiallahu anhu. Very just, fair man, great sahabi, who had great qualities, so much so that when Umar radiallahu anhu passed away, he said if he was still alive, he would be the Khalifa. I would definitely put Abu Ubaidah as the Khalifa. And Aisha said, he loves you too much. He's going to be biased towards you. Who's not going to be biased towards the Prophet ﷺ, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, look, why don't you choose the arbitrator? So she says, I want my dad. Now, for any person, marital couple, usually having your dad, the woman having her dad to be the arbitrator, means things are going to work in her advantage. So the Prophet ﷺ says, okay, fine, we'll bring your dad, we'll bring Abu Bakr. So the Prophet ﷺ calls Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu sits down. The Prophet ﷺ sits, and Aisha radiallahu anha sits. And Rasulullah ﷺ says to Aisha, would you like to go first? And Aisha says to the Prophet ﷺ, no, why don't you go first so I can make sure that what you're saying is right? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu jumps on Aisha. Dad showed a different side. Jumped on her. And Rasulullah ﷺ stood in front of Aisha to defend her from her own father. And Rasulullah ﷺ says, we didn't bring you here for this, Abu Bakr. And he sent Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu away, and that actually diffused the problem, because the Prophet ﷺ started laughing with Aisha and saying, see, I saved you. If it wasn't for me, you would have been in a lot of trouble. But the point was, what was Abu Bakr showing? Allah and His Messenger ﷺ come first. But does that mean that he was a bad father? Does that mean that he didn't? I'm not advocating a person to leave his family behind and to, go away from the house 8 months, 9 months, and then come home every once in a while, leave his family without a father. No, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu loved his parents, loved his children. And they loved him too, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And we see so many instances that show that love, that bond that they had with their father. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, that soft man, very, very soft-spoken, very loving. But at the same time, he always put priorities, and his personality rubbed off on the children. And I'll give you an example. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu had such a beautiful voice in Quran, and he would cry so much when he would read Quran, that the way his da'wah, and this is why I always tell the brothers and sisters, pray in public if you get a chance. Let people hear the recitation of the Quran. Don't go hide in a corner. Sisters, don't say that you have udhr shar'i to pray in the car. You don't. Pray, and especially if it's Maghrib or Isha, brothers, and even if you think that your voice is not beautiful, let someone hear the Quran. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he was given protection, when he was on his way to make hijrah to Habasha, and Dughna gave him protection, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu turned half of his house into an open courtyard, and he would stand out there and pray Qiyamul Layl. And the Quraysh, their families, the enemies of Allah and His Messenger ﷺ, their wives and their children were coming to listen to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu read. He was hypnotic, subhanAllah, how beautiful his voice was, how much emotion, sincerity he had in his voice. And he used to stop on one ayah, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when you read in his seerah, for an entire night, Abu Bakr would stop on one ayah, reflecting, at-tadabbur, tafakkur, on one ayah. Now, how did that rub off on the children? Now let's look at Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, the woman who went from the house of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the best of non-prophets, to the best of prophets, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Those are the households she lived in. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, her nephew, Abdullah ibn Zubair, or actually Urwa ibn Zubair, he tells this story radiallahu anhu. When he was the nephew, his mother Asma married a Zubair. May Allah be pleased with them all. Beautiful household, subhanAllah. He says that one day I went to go visit my aunt Aisha. وَهِيَ خَالَتِي. She's my aunt, right? So I had permission to just walk in. So I walked in, and I noticed that she was praying salah. And she was taking long in her qiyam. And so I went and I stood behind her. When it got really long, I went and I stood behind her so that she could know that I was there. But she kept on reading. And she was reading one ayah over and over and over and over again. فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَوَقَانَ عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ. Allah was lenient with us, and He protected us from the hellfire, from the punishment. وَتَدْعُوا وَتَبْكِي وَتَدْعُوا وَتَبْكِي تَقْرَأ وَتَدْعُوا وَتَبْكِي. She would read, she would make dua, and she would cry. So Urwa says, I decided, you know what? This isn't working. She's not going to stop anytime soon. Let me go do my shopping. Let me go to the souk and take care of some of my things, and then I'll come back and I'll see her afterwards. So he left her house, and it wasn't like you could just drive to Walmart or Kroger's or whatever it is that you have and just get things done in your car and then go drop it off at home and come back within 5 minutes. He went to the souk, he did what he had to do. He came back and he said, Wallahi, I found her on the same ayah, reading the same ayah over again, crying, making dua. SubhanAllah, what does this show you? This is the effect of good tarbiyah. This is the family of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. This is the effect that he had. It starts with the home. Look at any of the great imams in our history. It started with the home. It started with the parents. Very, very, very early on. And subhanAllah, we have to think to ourselves, am I involving my family in the da'wah the way that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu involved his family? A lot of times brothers think, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do da'wah and I'm going to, leave my family at home and I'm never going to take my kids to the masjid. My wife is not going to have any exposure. No, it's just going to be me. No, involve your whole family. Become a family of da'wah, a family of activism, a family of values, a family of those principles. Involve your children, right? Even if it's something small, involve your children. I remember one of the most powerful things that I had in growing up, and some of you might have this. If you don't, then you need to get it. SubhanAllah, and I thought about it just a few days ago, just so I'm not a hypocrite. I don't have it at home, but I thought about it just today. I told my wife, we need to get this, right? I remember growing up, there was a thing that was, or a little plastic structure of Masjid al-Aqsa. And if you pick up the dome, it was for sadaqah, right? It was a charity box in the house. And every single time I would come home, right, it was the first thing that I would see. The first thing that I would see was that. So everybody in the family, whenever we had a little bit of extra change, what do? We all go put it there. We have an extra $1, you put it there, right? And then at the end of the month, my family would actually take it apart, and then we'd see how much we collected. And subhanAllah, our parents would congratulate us, and they would give that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Involve the family in da'wah. Involve them in giving sadaqah at an early age. Right? This is tarbiyah. Even when, but Shaykh, they don't have to do this yet, they don't have to do that yet, they don't have to do this yet. The Sahaba in Bukhari, you know what they used to do with their children in the time of Ramadan? They didn't have to fast yet. Right? They weren't baligh yet, they didn't reach the age of puberty yet, they didn't have to fast, technically speaking. But the Sahaba, Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, what does he say? We used to give them toys, right? We used to try to keep them occupied just to get them in the habit of fasting. Because that's the whole concept of a family moving together. Family halaqas, family talking about deen. Most of the time talking about deen in the family is off limits. You don't talk about, nobody walks in the house. And subhanAllah, even saying assalamu alaikum to your family is like weird. How many of us call our husbands and wives and say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh? Right? Very few though. Very few. Usually it's like, hey, you need anything from the grocery store? Okay, Allah Hafiz. No. Speaking with them in terms of deen. Having halaqas at home, not in the sense that you have to gather around and make things awkward, right? Don't try to do this off the bat. But speaking about deen at the house, right? Encouraging one another. And then the first thing is being an example. You know what runs children away from Islam more than anything else? You guys might not like my answer, by the way. But wallahi, this is from my limited experience, but I am wholeheartedly convinced that this is the truth. You know what really runs kids away from Islam? Dysfunctional marriages. When the parents aren't getting along, and it's obvious, and sometimes even going to the point where they're pitting their children against each other, there's obvious bickering, there's obviously something going on, because you know what that does? That reinforces everything they're hearing outside the house, and even inside the house on their TVs and on their iPhones and laptops and whatever it is, that your religion is backwards, your culture is backwards, there's no sense of love, there's no sense of compassion, religion is this, religion is that, right? Islam is oppressive, all that. All of that is reinforced in the way that they see you. They don't want to come home, right? It's unpleasant. I don't want to be around them anymore. SubhanAllah, it's hard for a child to come from a broken home and really have that self-esteem and confidence and love for their deen. So make sure that you're demonstrating the example of deen in your daily lives. Right? Son, we do this, or daughter, we do this because this is the sunnah. Right? Saying nice words to each other, gestures to each other. Right? Rasulullah ﷺ, what would he do? Every single night, Rasulullah ﷺ would kiss his wife every time he entered into the home. Right? So gestures, showing love, showing that Islam makes us beautiful. Islam makes us people of dignity. Making them love the deen and then involving them in da'wah. Somehow involving them in da'wah. Otherwise, they will turn their backs on the da'wah and they'll turn their backs on you too, because what you to them are the manifestation of the standard of religion. And if you're not living up to it, then that's not a religion they want to be a part of. So make sure that we try to live our lives the way Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu lived. And I'll end with one story, because you really want to understand, subhanAllah, a person with priorities and a person who does not stop being a good family man, but at the same time puts the priority of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam first. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu called his parents to Islam for a very, very long time. Long time. And Abu Qahafa, and by the way, what was Abu Bakr's real name? Does anyone know? Abdullah ibn Uthman. Abdullah ibn Uthman. That's Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. His father, Abu Quhafa, is Uthman. His father, Abi Quhafa, for a long time refused to accept Islam. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would plead with him to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger. We don't understand the blessing of having Muslim parents, subhanAllah. Those of you who have Muslim parents, you don't understand the blessing. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu longed for it. And then when his dad finally became Muslim, just very shortly before his death, he only lived shortly after that. Right, in the narration, some of them say up to a year, a few months even, right? And subhanAllah, when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu finally achieved that, of seeing his father become Muslim, he started to cry. SubhanAllah. And they weren't just tears of joy. So his family said to him, right, Asma radiallahu anha said to him, why are you crying? You know, alhamdulillah, you've been wanting this your entire life. You've been waiting for the moment that your dad becomes Muslim. Why are you crying? And he says, because I wish Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam got to see the same thing with his own dad. He felt bad. SubhanAllah, he grieved that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his parents passed away before revelation came to him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He grieved because he knows how much the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would have wanted that. Right? Priorities, demonstrating through example. And we see it in all of his family. Aisha, radiallahu anha. You don't need anything more than that. SubhanAllah. Aisha, the great faqih, the great scholar of the ummah, the muhadditha, the one who gave us 1,600 ahadith from the Prophet ﷺ that otherwise we would have never had access to. Right? Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, an example. Asma radiallahu ta'ala anha. I could go on and on. The mother of Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And if you want to read something that'll really teach you about someone who teaches their children to love Allah first, look at the conversation between Asma and her children. Asma and her son Abdullah in his last moments in this life. I don't have time to go into them. Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr radiallahu anhu. These were great people. Why? Because for the Sahaba, this was not just a one-man affair. Ali radiallahu anhu, Fatima radiallahu anhu, Al-Hasan and Hussein, may Allah be pleased with them. Right? It was everybody together being in this. But it starts with being an example. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us examples for our children, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us and our families to enter into Al-Jannah together in Jannat al-Firdaus, in the companionship of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the greatest family man, the greatest individual, the greatest human being to ever walk the face of the earth, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to join us with our families, with the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and their families. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.